John 15, verse 7, but if you live in life union with me, and if my words live powerfully within you, then you can ask whatever you desire, and it will be done. When your lives bear abundant fruit, you demonstrate that you are my mature disciples who glorify my Father. Does that sound familiar? The mature expression of Romans 8. Now I want you to look at verse 9. Are you ready? I love each of you with the same love the Father loves me. He's talking about maturity in the verse before. He's talking about abundant fruit in the verse before. He's talking about life union in the verse before. And then he graduates into now. To get to maturity, there's one thing you're going to have to know. I love each of you with the same love the Father loves me. This is my apologetic for life. I love each of you with the same love that the Father loves me. You must continually let my love nourish your hearts. Watch this. If you keep my commands, you'll live in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands, for I continually live nourished and empowered by his love. My purpose for telling you these things is so the joy that I experience will fill your hearts with overflowing gladness. The joy of what? Belonging to the Father by way of beloved identity. But I want you to pay attention to what sits in the middle. The grace to keep the command of God. The grace for holiness is in beloved identity. The grace for it, how do you know that? Because I tried to willpower my way into holiness. I tried to bench press temptation. I failed and I failed. Hear me, I failed and I failed and I failed and I failed. And my favorite verses became the righteous man falls yea 7 times, but he keeps getting up. His mercies are new every morning. His mercies endure forever. I could quote those verses. I lived those verses. And I couldn't get out of a cycle of dysfunction. I could not escape. Listen to me. I could not escape a cycle of compromise because I wanted to. I had to first believe he loved me. I remember for years preaching the first love, the Revelations 2, I have somewhat against you. You've left your first love. Unless you repent and return and do your first works, I'll come remove from you your lampstand. And I said, you got to live afraid of what's going to happen to you if you've lost your first love. And I forgot to tell people that we love him because he first loved us. I didn't want to, but I didn't know. And I thought what I need to do is preach it a little louder and preach it a little harder. And maybe if I believed it a little bit more, and maybe if I wasn't just so fundamentally screwed up, maybe if I just wasn't so broken at the core of who I am. And he said, no, it's in that weakness. My strength is made perfect. And I'm going to give you the ability to keep my command. I'm going to give you the ability to keep my command, but it's going to start with you believing. I'm fascinated with you when you couldn't keep a command if your life depended on it. When you couldn't get one letter of the law right, I was fascinated with you. My gaze, do you hear the gospel today? My gaze was turned toward you when you could not measure up regardless of how hard you strived. Is somebody hearing the gospel today? Does it leave you there? No, that's the incomplete message of the ragamuffin that I don't agree with in my heart. This idea that Jesus loves you and leaves you like you are. I'm telling you, the grace of God is not God turning his head and looking the other way. The grace of God is God staring it in the eyes and saying, we're going to deal with this once and for all, because that does not agree with beloved identity. One theologian said, God will tolerate nothing in us that is not of love's kind. God in love will tolerate nothing in me that is not of love's kind. What'd you say, Mike Bickle? All of God's judgments are aimed at whatever interferes with love. So come to me as a judge. Come to me today with justice. Come to me today and rule my heart, Lord, because there's stuff in me that just can't get it right. And it was when I dared to believe he loved me. Oh, how he loved me, how he loves me so. Oh, how he loves me. When I began to wave that banner in the secret place, I began to find that when temptation came, there was nothing for it to attach itself to, because that former identification had been demolished. How? Because of my discipline? Christus Victor. The former identification was demolished through Christus Victor. It was a resurrected Christ. It was a crucified Christ, an ascended Christ, and an enthroned Christ. And this, friend, is the gospel of the kingdom. How are you going to get out of the mess you're in? He loves you. I hope that's scandalous. That woman that was taken in adultery moments before, he looks at her and says, go your way and sin no more. Like, look, no, you need to hear the backstory. She needs to go through the process, right? I mean, she's got some maturing to do. This is all new to her. He said, not once you've seen the eyes of the beloved. Once you've seen how I see you, you won't settle for the touch of any man who does not agree with how I see you. You settled for sex, but I designed you for love. And this beloved identity is going to not let you ever come up with another definition of intimacy. You are not a body to be used. You are a heart that is treasured. And for years I get, Lord, help me make good decisions. Help me do what's right. Help me live in holiness. Help me to please you. Help me. And I go, I'm trying, I'm praying, I'm doing everything. I just can't. I know this is a level of vulnerability people are not comfortable with, but I'm not comfortable without it. I'm not comfortable with telling you I made it to this revelation because of how well I checked fundamental evangelical boxes. I failed more than you all. I'm right up there with Paul when he called himself the chief of sinners. But when the love of God conquered my wanderings, when the love of God changed my name, when the love of God said you're not a pervert and you're not a liar and you're not greedy, you're not a self-promoter, when the love of God came after those things in my heart, when those things tried to return to knock on the door, Luke 11 had showed up and said, this house is furnished. This is not an empty house where dark things used to live. This is a house furnished with beloved identity. And everywhere you turn, there's a resting place for beloved identity. And the house of my interior world is furnished with the resting place of beloved identity. The resting place of beloved identity. I feel this in my bones again today. I feel the fear of the Lord is giving somebody permission to come out of the lie. That behavior is not who you are, friend. You may watch this in a jail cell and you feel worthless. I'm telling you, that behavior is not who you are. Your past does not define you. You are not the sum of your mistakes, friend. You are beloved. And the Father is looking into the pig pen of your failures and saying, I want you more than you could ever possibly believe that you were wanted. And I feel a sense of the spirit of belonging begin to come. We had this discussion this week. Johnson sent this to me. The spirit of belonging is beginning to come into people's homes. I think churches are going to get together and they're going to watch this and it's going to challenge some of you because you're going to go, I thought it was all about a legal contract. I thought it was all about God paying my ransom. I'm telling you, this is not about a ransom note. This is not about a ransom bill. This is about radical, violent love coming towards you and saying, I will tolerate nothing in you that is not of love's kind. I will tolerate nothing in you that is not of love's kind. He's coming after it, friend. And I'm telling you, I'm finding holiness without aiming at holiness. I'm finding consecration without having to check boxes and follow rules. I'm just finding a heart that doesn't want to wander because I'm attached to the one whose breath has become my compulsion for life. The Spirit of the living God has made his fatherhood other than abstract. I'm finding the reason I'm alive during this quarantine. I'm finding the reason I'm alive. I want to shout it from the rooftops. I want to shout it from the rooftops. The revelation doesn't come to the man who's never stumbled. The revelation comes to the man who, in the middle of his stumbling, dared to believe that the touch of Christus Victor would bring a breakthrough that would absolutely dismantle every lie of misidentification. For years, I asked people to fully give themselves to a God that they believed was mostly displeased with them. And how could you ever fully give yourself to a God who was mostly disappointed with you? And I thought what I needed people to do, I needed to preach until people came into agreement with God's disappointment. And you know what that put me in, Rudy? It put me in a cycle of altar call after altar call after altar call and feeling good for a minute and then showing 3 days later shows up the same stuff I was in. Is anybody hear what I'm saying in here? Couldn't get out of it. And I couldn't get out of it. So I tried to try harder. And then when trying harder didn't work, I learned to pretend. Oh, I learned to pretend, and when I started to play that game, it became a vicious cycle of image protection, and I could not tell people what it was like to be broken, and I could not access the grace of one who's poor in spirit. But when March 3rd and 4th and 5th, 2009 came, and the love of God came with fury into my world and said, I will not agree with anything in you that is not of love's kind. All of a sudden the light came on, and I had wanted to do right, and I had tried to do right, and I'm telling you, there is a more excellent way, friend, and that is to let the love of God come dismantle every point of identification that does not agree that you're beloved.